Right, see if she starts. Quick fuel pump prime. Ignition's up. Sounds like the pump is priming. 3 or 4 months. Oh, good old French cars. Who says they're unreliable? Right, let's get some heat in here because it is, as you can probably see from my breath, it is freezing out today in the UK. 0 degrees according to the little Clio, and I'm out here making you a video. So yeah, let's get the car warmed up and we'll go from there. Good morning YouTube, and welcome back to a cold morning in the UK. 0 degrees outside today, absolutely freezing in my tin shed. But in today's video, we're going to be doing sort of a roundup for the Clio 172 Cup project, what it's cost to build, and ultimately what we're going to be doing moving forward. So stay tuned. So a few of you have asked for an update on the little Clio 172 Cup. I'm going to be honest, not a lot's happened with it. It's definitely not a car I enjoy taking out in the winter for 3 reasons. 1, front wheel drive, open diff, slippery roads. It's no good. 2, the weather. Like, it absolutely eats steel cars, especially cars like this. Some of the stuff I've seen on the owners clubs with the rust now, it's just like, it ain't worth it. Because the thing is when rust sets in, it just makes such a mess and it costs a small fortune to sort out. So I've had no interest in driving it with salt on the roads, even though with the lack of aircon it's the best time. And finally, because I've got no roof lining or anything like that, when it does have a freeze over or a frost, as it warms up, it melts in the car, you get drips of water on you. It's really not a pleasant experience, and it's almost the same in the summer. Like, you get it out when it's too hot, the heat coming in here is just relentless. So yeah, it's sort of a once a month, 1 month of the year, should I say, toy really, which is a bit disappointing to say, but do you know what, we'll get it out this year. We'll take it for some runs. I really want to get over to Wales, so yeah, that is definitely something I want to try and do in it this year. So to give you guys who aren't familiar with the channel a bit of a background on the 172 Cup, well, many years ago, back in my early 20s, I had a small workshop working on them, and back then, I mean, I still love them now, but they were everything to me. I adored them, modifying them, driving them, going out in them, just being a part of a club and a scene. And it was the first car that I really got behind with that, and that then transformed into a workshop doing small odds and sods, and then life happened, house, had to have one car, and that's sort of where the M3s come in. And then I didn't actually end up using the Clio a lot, so sold it, and like I say, really missed them. Always when I saw them on the road, I thought, oh, I've got to have one of those again. And this one came up at the time I was in Swindon, living in Swindon. This one come down the road from me. It was literally a half-hour drive away, and saw the advert. It looked pretty tired in the advert. It looked like it hadn't had a lot of love, but as the famous words pop the hood, there was an RS2 on there. And again, for those that don't know, my company was behind developing and building and producing those, and we'd sold all the rights on, so I didn't have access to them anymore. And do you know what, as soon as I saw that on there, I thought, yeah, gonna go and get it. And I can tell you what, like, back then they were a lot cheaper. Like 5-6 years ago now, I've had this, they were so cheap to buy. These were like £1,500-2,000 cars for half decent ones. And like I say, I knew this needed some love, and ended up obviously purchasing it, running around in it, using it as a bit of toy on the weekend. I'd also just bought the E46 M3, and that was my baby. That was the car I'd wanted for many years. And this sort of just did the duties when I wanted to go for a Sunday morning run, because where I lived I was near the Cotswolds, which was brilliant for this sort of car, back road blasting. And then me and my brother said, look, do you know what, it's my 30th birthday, I want to go to the Nürburgring. I want to take the E46 M3, but I'm just like, do you know what, I've just bought it. I'm not a massive rear wheel drive person at all. I had a 320D, and like, if it's going to go wrong, last place I want it to happen is there, because 1, you're miles away from home, 2, it's very expensive to crash at the Nürburgring. And like I say, I just didn't have enough seat time in that car. And like I say, I'm not saying I couldn't drive it, but when you're there, you get sucked into the atmosphere. And I thought, do you know what, just take the trusty little Clio. And do you know what, it performed faultlessly. I'll put the link at the end of the video for when we did that road trip. It was brilliant, and obviously excuse the editing. I'd like to think things have got a little bit better with the video recording then, but we had an absolute brilliant time, and the car performed faultlessly. We drove there, a couple of laps around the ring, my brother had a go in it, then we drove it back, and it was very much a standard car at that point. So yeah, absolutely fell back in love with them again. I thought, do you know what, I'm going to build one like I used to have, but I think I'm going to go one step further. And I used to, like I say, have a Mark II 172 that was silver, iceberg silver, and I love that car. I really shouldn't. That's the one I shouldn't have sold because there were many, many good memories in it. But I thought, do you know what? I can take this one. I can build it better than that. New stuff's out. I know more about them now. And yeah, just have it as sort of a Member Berries car in the garage. And here we are. So I've had a lot of projects. For those of you who watch the channel, I sort of just got well too stuck into stuff. Like really, I mean, this is what happens when you get to your mid-30s and you don't have kids, geez. But the Cup, unfortunately, ended up just being parked at my missus's mum's house. It was left there, had cardboard boxes on it. It was getting in her way. It was just a bit of a mess, really. And every time I went round there and saw it, I opened the garage door, peeked in, I thought, oh God, it's looking worse. Dust settling on it, tyres are going flat. And that is when I made the decision, God, what was it now? 2 or 3 years ago when I first started the series? Again, I'll link the series at the end of the video, but it was looking pretty sorry for itself, and I was like, we can turn this around. I knew underneath the paintwork was still pretty good. Few stone chips and stuff on the front to be expected. I think it's like 133,000 miles, but I thought, do you know what? Let's do it. Let's pull this out, get it out of storage, start the work on it. And then as time progressed, obviously for me building it, there's no real labour charge other than my own time, and I do enjoy it. Really do enjoy tinkering in the sunshine. Not so much in this weather where you can see my breath today. And I've had a lot of people ask me what it cost to build. What is the score with this? Because I was going through so many bits. So today I'll go down with a breakdown of the parts that I've spent on it. But like I say, there is no labour on that, so this can add up really quickly. So yeah, hopefully you guys find this a little bit interesting. So let's start with the base car. Well, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, you could pick a really nice one of these up 5-6 years ago for £3,500–4,000. The thing was, a lot of people loved the Cups because they were the lightest, they were the most rawest, they didn't have things like ABS or aircon, and a lot of them got converted to track cars, sort of like what I've done, stripped it out, people hooned around in them, they were good, cheap fun. And the problem is to find a good standard base car now is not cheap. I mean, these are realistically, obviously there are going to be ones that are cheaper, but for a running semi-decent car that doesn't need all the arches cut out and rewelding from rust, 2.5–3 grand is your entry level, where you're going to start getting like teething problems, going to need tyres, wheel refurb, dampers, shocks, bushes, etc. And then I have now seen them exceeding £10,000. There was one up on eBay last year in the summer, £10,000. I think it had about 35,000 miles on it. So it's certainly a low mileage example, and you wouldn't want to do what I've done to this with that because you just kill the value in it. But you might want to do it. You might enjoy it. You might be like me and think, do you know what? I haven't done this as an investment, even though these are going up even in this spec. But yeah, so base car, let's say 3.5–4 grand to get you into one that's going to need a few bits doing. So as many of you know who've driven these, out the box, they are just fantastic fun. They don't really need the modifications. The biggest gripe I always had with them was the seating position. It sat so high, I'm over 6 foot, so it was just a bit, if you had a crash helmet on, you'd be scuffing the roof if you're on track in them, and it always felt like you were on top of the car rather than in the car. So I always had an issue with the seats. But not horrific. Comfortable. I've driven across Europe in my Phase 1 172, went out to the Alps in it. Absolutely flawless. When these were like, I picked that up for, I think I paid 300 quid for a Phase 1 172. Wouldn't dream of getting that one for that sort of money now. But anyway, like I say, in today's video, we're going to go over all the bits I've done to this. And the problem is with this car, I've actually had people in the comments say, I've ruined it. I've made it look terrible. It was a future classic. I was like, whatever. And I do agree in some parts that it is definitely not a daily. When the E92 M3 alternator failed, I ended up using this for about 2 weeks every day to work. It was horrible. Like the blind spots pulling out of junctions, the pure motorsport gear shift rattle. Oh man, it's not something you want to be in at 6:30 in the morning when it's cold, but it was usable, it worked. And do you know what, when it was warmed up and you were in the mood, it was still good fun. You enjoyed the journey home, it was a bit of a blast. But yeah, like I say, we will now go over the breakdown of all the parts that I've done to the car. So we will start with the engine. As I mentioned, when these were cheap cars, you could pick up a good F4R, which is the engine code for these, for about £200–300, half decent. Now, it's not so much the money side of it, it's whether you can pick one up that's got any service history, that's not absolutely shagged. Like, I was looking at eBay just out of curiosity to see how much these are going for, how much these are selling for, and realistically, you're getting a bit of an unknown for about £500. So, yeah, they used to be cheap, but not so much now. And like I say, I've always stuck with the standard core engine. And the reason for that is if you ever blew it up, it was just easy to replace. If you start going down the road of forging it, you know, spending big money building what would hopefully be a bulletproof block, I've just seen it time and time again where they just don't seem to be. I know you can get different engine builders and that's always going to be a key ingredient, but there always seems to be, whenever I was in the scene, whenever I used to see other people doing it, they'd spend loads of money on the engine and it would just take the fun out of the car, because if something went wrong, say for example, I don't know, someone mapped it badly or it wasn't built together correctly and you'd spent £2,000-3,000 building a fully forged engine, all balanced, solid lifters, one-piece valves, it can just end up being a fortune. So I'm going to do some light head work to this, but the actual main part of the block, pistons, etc., I'm going to leave completely standard. The RS2 intake manifold, the party piece of this car, the products that I say me and my old business partner designed, produced, it's a wonderful thing. It makes such a howling noise. You don't have any of the issues with the ITB, so individual throttle bodies. It can still use, if you've got it, all your cruise control, etc. And they drive so well with it. Like normally round town as like a standard car, and then once you open it up you get that gurgle, you get that top end scream. There is payoff for mid-range torque, unfortunately, and there were people that said, nah, I'd rather keep the standard inlet, but if you're driving the car above 5,000 RPM, man, they make a great noise. So there is a company that now reproduces them. Unfortunately, from what I gather, and I've been told by a few people, they no longer use the carbon trumpets inside, which is disappointing, because that was a big part of getting the power out of it, was the perfection of the design. And for whatever reason, they're not using the trumpets. So if it was me and I was going to go in the market like I've done with this one, I'd buy one of the original JMS ones. And like I say, that way, you know, it's got the carbon trumpets and it's pretty easy to check. You can easily just put a torch through the plenum, and if you can see 4 trumpets in there, it's one of the early ones. Cost, well, an RS2 now, I think new, they're about £1,200, and like I say, you don't get those carbon trumpets, unfortunately, unless they have revised that since I last looked into them. And used, like I say, £1,000 for one. And do you know what? If you buy one, it's always going to be worth that. You need other bits like the solid engine mounts, because of the block movement in the standard mounts, it ends up smashing into the slam panel. So it is a plug and play fit, so to speak. You don't have to permanently modify anything. It will need ECU calibration to make it work perfectly. But like I say, for me, I just love the noise, the experience of it all, and they're such a big part of what I did with the Renault Sport scene that I had to have one on the car again. And as we proved in the last video, when we went to Engine Dynamics, Andy managed to squeeze almost 195 horsepower out of it. And like I say, we still have a few more bits to go, which should hopefully see us past the 200 mark, which we'll be discussing later in this video. The custom air intake and heat shield. Well, the problem with the Mark II engine bay is it was never designed to have the RS2 intake manifold in it. So I've run the smaller battery in there, which was about £120 with the cage. I built a custom heat shield just out of some 2mm alley sheet, which again, I've done a video on. So if you check out the engine bay one, I'll try and squeeze it in the video at the end. You can see how I went about building that, and then just used a huge 70mm filter on there. So it's absolutely perfect. And I've done logs on it on the road, and we're literally about 2 or 3 degrees above the outside ambient temperature, which is pretty good going. And so that's even with slow moving traffic. And I think a lot of that is mainly to do with the big 100mm air duct that I've got running in the fog light. And I've took inspiration from my M3 CSL bumper from that, where it's like one big feed straight up to the intake. And when we put it on the dyno, like Andy said, it's working brilliantly. So thankfully, like I say, you can design these things in principle and then actually put them into practice and they don't work. But pleased to confirm, for about £100 with the sheet and the air filter, nice induction noise and nice cold air intake temperatures. Cam belt, like I say, for a cup it's a little bit easier because you don't have the air conditioning, but budget anywhere for a cam belt on these for about £300 to £500. If the dephaser pulley needs doing, £120, £150 more on top. I won't go into that in this video. Again, I did a recap video on all the things you should do and to look out for in these, and that is all detailed in there. So as I say, £500-600 on top of your already purchased price if it needs the belts doing all of a sudden. If you need tyres, brakes, etc., it all starts adding up pretty quickly. The rocker cover, I mean, on these it's just plain finished, it's not treated or anything like that, and I took the inspiration for the wrinkle paint from the Honda scene, and I love that textured effect, but I didn't want to go with a red because I didn't think it would tie in with all the blue on the car. So just went with a black wrinkle paint. You can pick it up for about £15. If you degrease the part, heat it up, spray it, you can do it in the garage. I've done it in the garage, and even however many years later now, 2 years later, that's still going absolutely strong, and it's really hard stuff. You can clean in the engine bay and it just looks brilliant. It removes any of that surface corrosion that you could see or staining that was on the original one, especially with the RS2 intake, because that's all now open. Exhaust system. So from experience, especially as that's the size that the collector on the exhaust is about 2.5 inches. So I've got a 2.5 inch decap pipe. That's used only off-road. I put the catalyst back in for daily driving. They're about 150 pound for the 172 because it's a bit of a swan neck effect where it runs around the subframe. And then you're spending another 400 pounds on a 2.5 inch catback exhaust. So on the one I've gone with, it's a twin silencer. It's always tempted to buy the single because it's cheaper. You've only paying for the one silencer, but honestly, especially in a car where it's stripped out like this, it is unbearably loud. Like, I've been on the motorway with single silencers and it's just not fun. Whereas this, you can still be on the motorway, you can still hear another person in the car talking, whereas single silencer, even with an interior, is just awful personally. And like I say, now with the track day regulations, so many of them require under 105 decibels that you're just never going to be able to use it on track. So for me, 2.5 inch silencer, I went with a downturn pipe because I wanted to make it from the standard outside looking, especially because I've kept the Torinis, I've kept the original colour. It all looks very factory from the outside, which I really like, and that's the beauty of the downturn. So basically the exhaust sweeps under the bumper and makes it look completely stock from the outside. Finally, for the engine, ECU calibration. So we went and saw Engine Dynamics, like I say, and Andy worked his magic, and you're looking at anywhere, depending on where you go, from £3 right up to £500. Obviously, it's going to vary from tuner to tuner. If you spent all this money, it's always worth getting it live calibrated, because you spend all that money to put a generic file on, it's a bit of a halfway house at least. Whereas if you go somewhere where they can put it on the dyno, they can check the AFR, they can check the ignition, they can get the absolute best out of it. And for those that saw this, I mean, we went to Surrey Rolling Road with a base file on it, which is what I have when I install these, because I'd put the different camshaft timing on there, again detailed in another video. And the car, I think it was 187 horsepower when it got to Engine Dynamics. So that was a safe generic file, fueling was okay, and Andy worked his magic and pushed it up to almost 195 horsepower. Now, for those of you that drive turbo cars or modified turbo cars, that's laughable gains, absolutely laughable. But you don't tune NA cars for big numbers. It just unfortunately isn't the way it works. They're quite a highly strung engine out of the factory. Maybe not compared to what Honda's put out, but for Renault, this was a performance engine, and like I say, getting another 7 horsepower was great. And it wasn't that was the key, it was the actual drivability, because I had a horrible hiccup at about 2000 RPM that you were driving around, and Andy fixed all that, and it now just screams to the red line. Absolutely wonderful to the red line. Suspension. Well, this is something when I was younger, for me, I always wanted the cars low, wasn't too bothered about how I did it, didn't get too carried away with performance brand tyres, but as time has gone on, man, if you cut corners on this sort of stuff, you'll just end up disappointed. And for me, I wanted a good set of road coilovers for this, so I did the Bilstein kit. Fantastic. Do you know what? It drives so well on the road. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not glass smooth like factory. You have got to understand that it's an aftermarket unit built for performance driving, but it lowers the height perfectly, because obviously I stripped all the weight out of it. It would have sat like it was on stilts. I think I had a picture of that somewhere. I'll try and find it. And there was a good like 4 inches on the rear from where I'd taken all the weight out of the back. And with the adjustable coilovers, you can do that. And the Bilsteins are all fixed damping, so there's no confusion with playing around setting it up. They've built it for a fast road kit, entry level track, tested on the Nürburgring. The stickers all over it suggest, and it works really well. And those kits are sort of £700, and like I say, that replaces all your springs and your dampers. Spacers. So for me, increasing the track of the vehicle generally improves the handling. There is payoffs that the vehicle can tramline, so the wider you go, the more it can follow the road, because you're sort of adjusting the geometry without, so they call them bump steer kits and stuff that you can buy to correct that. But for me, just stick with the standard Geo for the time being. put 15mm spacers on the front wheels, and then I've put hub spacers, which are a 10mm on the rear. And I think the front spacers with the bolts are about £40, and the rear, I want to say £20, £25 for a 10mm spacer. I'll underlay it all at the bottom for what it costs to do, but it just gave the car a beautiful stance. And for me, as I said, this car is an experience to drive and a sort of flashback to the past, and at the same time, also it looks great when it's parked up, which is what I wanted. And if that was going to be a payoff for a bit of B-road blasting control, I was happy to do it. Tyres, again, when I was younger, oh man, we used to fit these Yokohama Parada Spec 2s. They looked brilliant, but they had such a soft sidewall, terrible grip, and they were just cheap. You're putting them on 15-inch wheels, and I was just like, as time went on, I realised just how bad a choice I'd made with tyres in the past. And I've gone with Yokohamas again on this, and I've got the AD08Rs, and now these are the original AD08Rs before they changed over to the RS brand. So obviously over time these are just going to start to degrade because tyres do go off, unfortunately. They don't make them anymore, but they are a brilliant tyre, really solid sidewall, loads of grip. Not amazing in the wet, not terrible, but definitely not something you'd want a daily all year round. But as I say, hopefully we can get along to one of the Renault Sport track days and actually utilise these tyres on track. PBS brake pads, and I think I went with Brembo front brake discs. Well, these were actually recommended across the Honda scene back when I was in the EP3s and stuff. People loved them, and I thought, well, they're doing for the Clio now, let's give them a go. And they are fantastic. The power and the feedback, I mean, the only payoff that I can say about them is, one, potentially the cost, which I don't think is horrific. I think I bought front discs and pads for about £170 looking at my notes. But what is the killer is the brake dust. The brake dust is awful, like it burns onto them. I mean, if I track this and I don't put something on these wheels to seal them, I'm almost certainly going to be doing a wheel refurb on the front because they are so grimy and it really embeds into the clear coat. Well, whatever the clear coat is on powder coat, I guess, but it does certainly make a mess. But tremendous stopping power on the standard calipers. Caliper rebuild kit, so the calipers on these are a single piston design. The boots on mine were pretty tired. I mean, the actual seals all looked a mess, the pistons as well, and it was about £35 for a full front rebuild kit. And do you know what? While it was apart, painted the calipers, and they've been absolutely spot on, because the last thing you want to do is spend £170 on brake disc and pads, have a binding caliper, and actually ruin the new equipment you've bought. So it made sense while it was all apart to restore it, and obviously do a brake fluid flush as well, so you can throw in another £15–20 for the brake fluid as well on that one. So the remaining parts, I mean, this is one of those things, it's all well and good putting a £700, £1,500 worth of suspension on the car and then not doing all the other parts around it. So as we mentioned, the tyres, I've also done genuine Renault lower arms, I've done the Powerflex steering rack bushes, new track rod ends. I mean, I'll overlay at the bottom, but I must have done £300–400 on bushes and stuff just on the front end. And like I say, I've still got to do the rear arm bushes as well at some point. That'll be a job for when we got a ramp. I'm not doing that on the floor. But essentially just tightened the whole front end up. Makes a massive difference to the feedback. And again, if you're spending all that money on suspension and tyres, it's an absolute waste of time if all the bushes are shot. So done that as well, and then just got basic alignment done. Because I haven't got adjustable camber, because I'm still running the standard top mounts, there's not really a lot you can do for these. But like I say, unless you get adjustable top mounts and camber bolts, it's pretty much to fix that up. And like I say, for me, on the road, it drives exactly how I want it to. But like I say, we might find some flaws with that when it goes on track. So the interior, well, this is a big one for me because it's where you spend the time. It's part of the engagement of the car. And you know what? On one side, it's horrific, but on the other, it's incredible. Like, it's such good fun when you're in here. Like, you can hear the stones flicking up in the back of the arches. You can feel the vibrations through the engine, the gear stick rattles, and it just feels like you're so in tune with the car when it's like this, when it's all stripped out. And even in standard form, these are so raw when you drive some of the modern stuff now. It's still great fun, but like I say, with the solid engine mounts, solid shifter, no interior, you are definitely part of the experience. And the beauty is 60–70 mile an hour is the same feeling as 120–130 in that. So you can do a lot more in terms of enjoyment without breaking the speed limits and having to drive to Germany, where obviously you would experience those on the Autobahn. So yeah, for me, we'll now discuss the interior. The Pure Motorsport shifter. Do you know what? This thing, like the way you're now so close to the steering wheel when you're changing, and the feel of it, it just, man, it feels so direct. It doesn't feel like it's a short shifter where it's been rushed. It just feels really good. As good as you're ever going to make that gearbox feel from a Renault. And if it didn't have the rattles, God, it would be the perfect solution for these. But they do make one hell of a noise when you're driving along there, because there's no sort of damping in it. It is solid. It just rattles all the time. You end up holding it. But I have heard that you can fill the selector shaft with lead shot, and that's supposed to help a lot. So that's going to be something for 2022 that we're going to try. But for about £350, you get this beautiful carbon stem, you get all the tower, all the new linkage, bush up front, and like I say, it actually feels like a nice gearbox to shift with. Not Honda S2000 good, but definitely enjoyable to use rather than the old loose walk from before. Steering wheel, well, the standard steering wheels are huge. They are just not nice to drive with. They don't feel particularly great, and to be honest with you, they fall apart. All the thumb grips come off of them, so it's certainly interesting for me anyway to replace that. Always catches my attention when I see the smaller wheels on these, that it's a bit of a plus. So this came with an OMP wheel with the OMP Boss, but it was a horrible plasticky leather looking wheel. It really wasn't very nice. So I bought the genuine Seibelt Cup Racer one, and this is from the Mark III, I believe, because the Mark II should have a blue band on the top, whereas the Mark III was all black. The blue would look nice with a cup, but you just always see they get grubby. It's just never nice. So I thought, you know what, we'll go all black, nice and easy to maintain, and I'm chuffed to bits with it. I haven't got any cruise control to worry about, whereas if you had a 182 you'd have the cruise control. I've got the horn on the stalk, so it's got a phase 1 stalk which works, little mini cab horn. And do you know what, it all works as it needs to, and it feels wonderful to drive with. Just the right size, 330mm for me, and that's it's probably about 220 quid for the steering wheel, and then you're probably looking at another 60 to £100 for the Boss, which adapts it to the standard unit so that you can use an aftermarket wheel. The Bimarco grip seats, well, I wanted to go all out on this because I had the Bimarco Futuras in my first Clio 172, the silver one, and I love them. Super comfortable, super supportive, and so well priced. And I thought, you know what, I don't want to build just the same one, I want to go one step better. And I went with the wraparounds, and yeah, it does add to the experience. It always looks pretty cool when you open the door, but the reality is pulling out the driveway, you've got blind spots absolutely everywhere. You're changing lanes on the motorway. Looking forward, it's a proper pain. It is a pain to use these on the road, but so I don't do many miles in it, and they are just absolutely superb in terms of supporting you in the car. They do feel absolutely brilliant when you're on it. Now, the pair of these, I think they're about £250–300, and then you've got to put some side mounts on there, which I've custom made directly to the floor. And the reason I've done that is I just wanted it as low as possible. As you can see, I've got loads of headroom on there for a crash helmet. I'm in line with the clocks. Dare I say it, I may go a smidge lower, but to be honest with you, I really like the way it's leaned back, you're in it. It's definitely a focused driving position. You wouldn't want to drive across Europe in it. But for, like I say, for £650–700, what a difference. The OMP harnesses, well, see if I can put one on because they're monstrous. Nice big, I think it's a 3-inch slant I've gone on there, so it's nice and wide compared to the 2-inch. Really supportive. Pain in the arse to get in and out of, and if you put the harness on and you haven't shut the door, you've got to take it back off so you can close the bloody door. It's a nightmare. But again, get in these seats, lock the harnesses down, and you can be so light on the steering wheel and the pedals, because it's not like you're bracing yourself everywhere on other cars. I've been into corners like in the M cars on the standard seats where you're like holding the steering wheel and propping yourself. So it makes a big difference just to be able to focus on the controls and be absolutely planted in the seat. And they're about £170 for the set. I know there's lots of places on eBay selling these Chinese cheap ones. I mean, when it comes to the seatbelt side of things, for me, it would always have to be a premium branded product. I just wouldn't want to take the chance. And that moves me on to the harness bar, something I wasn't aware of, to be honest with you. When fitting harnesses, you see a lot of times people just bolt them straight down to the floor. Discovered about a nasty thing called spinal compression, which is where if the harness is too low, if you crash, it'll actually bend all your lower back. So I've got this big like brace bar that runs across the back there, and it just makes sure that the harnesses stay dead in line with your shoulders. So if you do have an impact, it pulls into you rather than down on you and can give you spinal compression, which is not a good thing. So yeah, that was about £150, and I've had loads of people ask me where I had that, and that was just off of eBay for the brace bar, and the company that produces them no longer seem to be online, which is a real shame because the quality of it came all powder coated, all rose jointed, it's got all bracing down the bottom, absolute bargain. So for me, I've had people say, would I put a full cage in it? I'm not going to go proper racing in it. I don't really need the weight, so that's what stopped me doing it. But maybe one day, maybe I'll put a big cage in it, silver cage or a white cage and some white 2118s. But at the moment, I'm happy just to leave the interior like this. So the only final things for the interior, obviously I spray painted the whole thing. I did that with the rattle can. I think I did about 25 quid's worth of paint. I ended up leaving it in a matte finish. I didn't put the clear coat on it in the end because I kind of liked the way it matched in with the dash strips and the clock surrounds. But I mean, you could spend hundreds of pounds, maybe like £500, £600, if you went to a body shop, had it all properly smoothed off. But this is a rattle can job. And do you know what? It's held up really well. I didn't get any runs in it. It looks really good. Like, it looks really good. I'm really happy with how it came out. I put some skateboard grip tape on the floor because with it having no carpets, it is slippery if you're getting in and using your feet to get out. And then I did another £6 on a little ratchet strap in the back there just to hold a spare wheel. And you don't need to do that, it's just additional weight, but I just love that look from when you used to see rally cars with a spare wheel just hammered in the back, and especially as I had the well, it made sense just to keep it in there. So the only final things really for the interior will just be some potential carbon panels or some acrylic trim panels to go on those back quarters to hide those cavities, but say it's neither here nor there. It's not a big thing that I'm worried about anytime soon. The cosmetic upgrades, well, like I say, from the outside I wanted to keep the car pretty standard, and for me I went with the 172, 182 xenon headlight units. They technically shouldn't be in there because you don't have the xenon wash and jets and you don't have height adjustment done automatically. It's all uses the standard height for up and down on them, but they plug straight in, they work perfectly, they provide so much more light, and they just look so much more modern. I think I paid a couple of years ago, it's one of the first things I did to the car, it was about £120 for the pair of xenon headlight clusters, because the standard ones are just a halogen bulb. They are absolutely useless, and they make such a difference to the car at night for driving. And like I said, I don't do a lot of night driving, but it's nice to have it on there, and like I said, they do look a lot more modern. Next, on the front end, I did the Skoda splitter. Now, I don't know whether you can still get hold of these, but essentially they're £15. They're made of rubber. They are 95% the look of the original one. The original one's got more of a curvature to it, but when you hit anything curb bump, especially if you lowered the car, 120, 130 pounds, they break. If you get one out of carbon, they break. Whereas this one from Skoda, you literally screw it on with self-tapping screws, trim the ends, and essentially it's flexible and foldable. So if you do hit a curb or hit something, it will just bend and move out of the way. So for me, £15, no brainer. Went with the Skoda splitter on there. And then finally, the wheel refurbishment, where we went and saw Stan at Procraft Alloys. Man, when I dropped them off, even he was like, these are pretty bad, mate. Pretty bad indeed. And I was like, well, do what you can with them. And he, in the end, charged me £270 for that, which, I mean, his prices, I think, must have gone up now because that was a few years ago. But he basically stripped the wheel back, re-welded all the pitting that had occurred on the face. I mean, the barrels were absolutely disgusting on the inside. The tyres were going flat because they weren't holding a proper seal, and he stripped them down, re-welded them and powder coated them, and it was night and day difference. When they came back from him, I was actually shocked that they looked that good again, because I was like, they're not going to be perfect, there's a lot of damage there, but happy to have the original wheels. And as mentioned, I have got the eye for some white 2118 speed lines. I really, really like those wheels. I think they look really cool on these, and they're 15-inch. And then I would do the bullets in the white and the blue as well, just to sort of tie it in, and potentially a white cage if I went down that route years to come. But for the time being, that's not a priority modification. We've got plenty of exciting stuff coming soon. So what is next? Well, foreseeable future, especially for the early part of this year, definitely want to get it back out on the road again, which March time I want to be hooning around in this thing, enjoying some Sunday morning drives. Matt's got his Clio 200, so they're a good car pair to be out in because they're not stupidly powerful, they're just enjoyable fun. You can scream them out and just have general fun on B-road roads even in the UK. Now, Matt is going in to see Engine Dynamics potentially in the next month, and he is going to go with their stage 2, which is the cat cam package. Now that means he is going to have some camshafts left over. So if he does go ahead with this package, I've said to him, I'll take the 197-200 camshafts off you. That's one thing out of the way. I then need to get the 197-200 injectors, because the standard ones are, Andy said they're pretty much maxed out. You wouldn't want any more on those. And I would love to put the Pure Motorsport exhaust manifold on there. It like loops back up around the bulkhead. It looks awesome. And to be honest with you, I'm not expecting huge gains. I'm not doing it for the horsepower. I just think it'll look absolutely wicked in that engine bay. So getting them bits fitted, obviously it will be dropping the subframe. So there are other jobs that I'll move on to next that should be done at the same time. But ultimately, push it back to Engine Dynamics for 200 horsepower plus, because with that manifold, with the 197 cams, with the 197 injectors, there's no reason why this little car can't do it. And like I say, it's only another 5 horsepower. Maybe if we can get 205, that'd be amazing, but I can't see it happening on the standard block. But yeah, that'd be really cool, breaking the 200 mark. And like I say, does it really need any more power? 950 kilos? It's putting it down that's the issue. So as I mentioned, if I'm doing the manifold, dropping all the subframe down, it makes sense to put a limited slip diff in it, because it does one tyre fire a lot, and that would be really nice just to be able to utilise that power out of a front wheel drive car. And then you're at the point where you're like, well, if the gearbox is off, might as well get the synchros refurbished. 133,000 miles, box feels sweet, but be my luck that I put a diff in it and it goes. And if someone's got it all apart, you might as well drop some synchro rings in it while the box is off. Lightweight flywheel, standard clutch will be fine because it's pulling less weight and it's making, like I say, hardly any more over standard. I've never known a standard clutch to be an issue at 200 horsepower with the standard torque. So lightweight flywheel, get it nice and sharp and blipping fine. And like I say, it then just starts spiraling a little bit. And then I'm thinking, well, if I'm doing the 197-200 camshafts, do I go another step, take the head off, get the head ported, because there's good gains to be had in there. And then by the time I've ported the head, the valves on these are known to split because they're 2-piece valves and fall apart. So I put a set of Super Tech valves in it. Like, it's definitely going to be back on the road, March, definitely. And I definitely want to go with some drives with you guys. But I think ultimately it'll be next winter, if I get this unit sorted out, which we talked about in the 2022 recap, that I just strip it back down and go absolutely mad with it. And like I say, get it super lively, over 200 horsepower, and it'll be great fun. So thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Like I say, I'll include all the links at the end of all the bits we've done with the car, some of the earlier videos like the ring trip, and also the first review I did on the car back before I was even growing a beard. So yeah, definitely you can see how much the recording equipment and audio stuff has changed. So again, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and hopefully we'll see you in March when the little 172 Cup is back on the road again.